get this thing set up. All right. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Ashworth, and this YouTube channel is for two purposes. Purpose number one, to share a Bible study with each of you and to help you in your own spiritual growth. And number two, to share with you a plan that the Lord has showed me through the years for growing spiritually, a system for growing spiritually that will not only help you in your spiritual growth, but will guarantee your spiritual growth. All right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to begin in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, verse 1. Okay? These are Bible studies that I've done through the years, and I'm happy to share them with you. Let's open the Word together. You may find it on your mobile device, on your phone, on your iPad, computer, or whatever. But Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, verse 1. Now, if you don't know where Matthew is, it is the very first book in the New Testament. And we're going to begin with a look at the family tree of Jesus. You can call it ancestry.com/Jesus or family tree or something like that. Now, one of the questions that Christians will ask is, why are there 4 gospel accounts? There are. God has channeled one message through the unique personalities of 4 guys. Each account is coming at the life and ministry of Jesus from a completely different perspective. Matthew, which we're going to be spending time with, is all about proclaiming Jesus as the king who has come to rule over Israel. He begins with this genealogy that we're going to take a look at to give the pedigree of Jesus, to prove that Jesus really is the one that the Jews have been waiting for. Mark is the Reader's Digest version of the gospel accounts. Mark moves quickly and he covers a lot of ground in a short amount of time. Many scholars believe that Mark spent a whole lot of time with Peter, and that Peter was the source of a lot of Mark's material. Mark portrays Jesus as the one who came to serve. Luke is a doctor, a detailed historian, and a Gentile. Luke declares Jesus as the Son of Man, emphasizing his humanity. His original audience would have been those people who had been converted through the ministry of the Apostle Paul to the Gentiles. And it is not a coincidence that in the book of Acts, which Luke wrote, we see Luke himself as a part of Paul's ministry from Acts chapter 18 on. Before Acts chapter 18, he talks about them and they and, as an outsider. But then from chapter 18 on, he's talking about we and us. So that's how we know that he became an insider. He became part of the team there. John, the 4th one, wrote his gospel account a generation later to the 3rd generation of the church, sometime in the 90s AD. And John spends most of his time dealing with the last week of Christ. John emphasizes the deity of Christ, the fact that Jesus is God in the flesh. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are referred to as the synoptic gospels, written to the 2nd generation of church, covering a lot of the same ground, same stories. Matthew records the longest teachings of Jesus. Matthew has more references to the Old Testament than the other gospel accounts combined. And you understand why, right? Because he was addressing a Jewish audience who would have known the Old Testament. And Matthew's an interesting choice to write this gospel account, much less be chosen as an apostle. I have to turn my pages here. He was a tax collector. He was a Jew who worked for the Romans. He made his living from the Romans, collecting taxes from the Jewish people. Some people would have called him a traitor, a turncoat. He was padding his own pockets with the money he collected from his own people, and the Jews were not happy to see Matthew show up. Even today, who's excited when they talk to the IRS, when they have to pay taxes? But he was like Zacchaeus, whose story is in Luke chapter 19. He was viewed as a traitor and an outcast. So when Jesus wanted Matthew to follow him, it was the first time in a long time that anyone had wanted Matthew to be on their team. That's why he dropped everything and he followed Jesus. And Matthew chapter 9 will tell us that right after that, Matthew hosted a party with Jesus and with the disciples and with a whole bunch of tax collectors and sinners. In other words, Matthew held a party to give his old friends a chance to meet his new friends, to give them a chance to meet Jesus, just like he had. And I think Matthew is placed first in order because of his Jewish emphasis. There had been 400 years of silence from the prophet Malachi until the angel Gabriel appeared to Mary. Matthew ties the loose ends together with this genealogy at the beginning of his gospel account. And being a tax collector, he would have been meticulous in his record keeping. God worked through his personality to produce the Gospel of Matthew that is before you today. Now, if you haven't read your Bible very much, you won't know these names, and you may glaze over just a little bit as you read them. But here's what you need to understand. For someone who was trying to proclaim Jesus as the coming king, this genealogy could not have been more important. All right. Now, the first thing that we're going to notice about this genealogy, about the family tree of Jesus, is that it is a heritage of faith. A heritage of faith. Let's just read the first five, maybe the first part of verse 6. Verse 1 through the first part of verse 6. Now, I'm going to be reading from the New International Version, the 1984 edition. New International Version of the Bible, 1984 edition. Verse 1. A record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac, the father of Jacob. Jacob, the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah, the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez, the father of Hezron. Hezron, the father of Ram. Ram, the father of Amminadab. Amminadab, the father of Nahshon. Nahshon, the father of Salmon. Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of King David. Now, we'll just stop there. If you were a Jew in the first century and you picked up this scroll, it would absolutely grab your attention. Matthew begins with these words, a record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. This Jesus, Matthew says, is directly connected with two of the most foundational characters in all of Jewish history. The genealogy of Jesus begins with Abraham. He was the father of the Jewish people. Abraham received the command of God to leave home and go to a land God would show him. He had no idea where he was going, but he trusted God and went. God made the covenant with Abraham that he would make his descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. Two famous passages from the book of Genesis talk about that. Genesis 12, verse 3, God says to Abram, I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. What an amazing promise. Genesis 15 and verse 5. He took him outside and said, look up at the heavens and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. Now, this proves to us that God keeps his promises. He promised Abraham that this was going to happen, and it did. God promised David in 2 Samuel chapter 7 that his kingdom would be established forever. God had to keep those promises because God is faithful. That's just part of his nature. That's why Jesus is the son of David and the son of Abraham. He is the fulfillment of the prophecies made to David and to Abraham. Right out of the chute, Matthew is giving evidence that Jesus is the one the Jews have been waiting for all of their lives. Now, let's meet some of the people listed in the genealogy of Jesus. There is Isaac, who was the son of promise to Abraham and Sarah. Before he died, he put his blessing on his sons Jacob and Esau, even though Jacob deceived him and took the blessing that was intended for Esau. The blessings, good and bad, followed both men. Jacob wrestled with the angel of God at Bethel and set up the altar there to worship God. Later, after Jacob met Esau again and God kept harm from coming to Jacob, God called Jacob to go back to Bethel and to live there. Jacob went to his household, called on them to put away any foreign gods that were among them, and Jacob buried them under an oak tree in Shechem. And Jacob's sons are called Judah and his brothers there. And so the firstborn was Reuben. So it's unusual that the firstborn wasn't mentioned there. But it's interesting that Jesus is called the Lion of the tribe of what? The Lion of the tribe of Judah in the book of Revelation. When Jacob was giving his final blessings to his sons, we find these words in Genesis 49 and verse 10. It says, "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his." And Jacob, as he's dying, is prophesying that the Messiah would come from the tribe of Judah. And that's exactly what happened. Judah and his brothers sold their brother Joseph into slavery in Egypt, and then had to go to Joseph years later in Egypt to plead for food when a famine struck. A tremendous proof of God's mercy. Now, the next line in the genealogy says this: Judah is the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Now, you need to go to Genesis chapter 38 to see the story of Tamar. We are given 5 women here in the lineage of Jesus. Pointing out the women was very unusual for a Jewish genealogy. As the history goes, Judah had 3 sons. His oldest son married a woman named Tamar, and he died. And according to Jewish law, if your brother died childless, you were obligated to marry your brother's wife. Can you imagine that? That's why if you had a brother, you would be interested in who your brother was marrying. The second brother refused to have children by Tamar, and he died. The third brother was still young, and Tamar would have to wait until he grew up. But when he grew up, Judah didn't bring the son to Tamar. So Tamar, according to Genesis 38, came up with her own plan. She disguised herself as a prostitute and enticed Judah to sleep with her. And when he got ready to pay for this prostitute's services, he said, "I forgot my wallet." And she says this. Basically, she says, "You could pay me later, but leave me your seal and its cord. Leave me your seal and its cord, and the staff in your hand is collateral." And Judah goes and gets a sheep that he was supposed to give her as payment, but he couldn't find her, so he didn't pay her. And meanwhile, Tamar discovered she was pregnant. And word gets out on Facebook, well, not on Facebook, but word got out that she's pregnant. And Judah got upset that his daughter-in-law was pregnant out of wedlock. And then we have this, Genesis chapter 38, verse 24. About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant." Judah said, "Bring her out and have her burned to death." And as she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "I am pregnant by the man who owns these," she said. "See if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are." And Judah says, "Oh, snap." That's Tamar. And that's how she got into the lineage of Jesus. Chuck Swindoll calls this genealogy a family tree with knots. But Tamar is just the beginning. A little further down we read this: Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Rahab was a prostitute who hid the spies in Canaan because she believed God. Boy, there's a lot of seedy people in the genealogy of Jesus, aren't there? You could find Rahab's story in Joshua chapter 2 and Joshua chapter 6. And she's also found in Hebrews chapter 11 in the New Testament as part of faith's Hall of Fame. All Rahab knew about Israel's God is that he had parted the Red Sea for them when they came up out of Egypt, and how he had defeated the 2 kings of the Amorites along the way. And as a result, she wanted to follow Israel's God. And that's why she protected the 2 spies. And they ended up protecting and rescuing her and her family in return. Now, we don't know about this. We don't know until this genealogy that she ends up marrying one of the Israelite men. And now she's in the lineage of Jesus. One more. In verse 5, we read, "And to Boaz was born Obed by Ruth." Ruth was a Moabite woman who married an Israelite. Why is this significant? Well, back in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 3, we find this. No Ammonite or Moabite or any of their descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord, not even in the tenth generation. Ruth's husband died, and she was left with her mother-in-law Naomi. And she could have gone back to Moab to find food, seeing there was a famine in Israel. But her commitment to her mother-in-law is so moving that it has become part of wedding vows through the years. Tell me if you've heard this somewhere. It's from the book of Ruth, chapter 1, verses 16 and 17. It says, "But Ruth replied, 'Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me.'" And later on, she found a field where she could pick up ears of grain that the harvesters had dropped, and the field just happened to belong to a man named Boaz, who just happened to be a relative of Naomi's late husband. God was orchestrating the whole thing, wasn't he? They later married, and this Moabite woman, because of her commitment to her late husband's family, became the great-grandfather of King David himself. Now, this is where we'll pick it up next time. Thanks for joining us. I look forward to studying the Word with you, and I look forward next time to talking to you about spiritual growth and how important it is and how it is guaranteed to happen in your life if you'll take certain steps in your life. God bless you. I'll see you next time.